Fairy Tales with a Mexican Twist is a book written for anyone interested in his or her quality of life. It's an inspiration for pausing and reflecting about how have I been leading my own life. It has been associated, because of the title Fairy Tales, with a book for children. It's actually meant to be for adults. I do believe in magic in everyday life. Children are in contact with that magic. We as adults seem to have lost it. But it is there, and Fairy Tales with a Mexican Twist brings that in the stories. I was born in Mexico, but I guess I contain in myself this diversity of cultures. My parents came from Russia, from Europe. I was born here. I'm first generation. I'm Jewish. I'm Mexican. I am a Jungian analyst. And when I studied Jung, I discovered the richness we have in Mexico with the Mayan and Nahuatl mythologies. I became a lover of mythology and also of fairy tales. When I was traveling in Mexico, I began asking and finding out and looking from the oral tradition that people still keep alive and believe in of the Mexican culture and Mexican legends. It's the most interesting material, and I wanted somehow to incorporate it into my writing. One of the stories that comes to mind right now is the last one, called Guayamón. This is an hacienda that still exists in the south of Mexico. It's now a hotel where I stayed, and the experience of being there and getting to know the actual ceiba that I talk about, which is this most special ancient tree that has been standing there for centuries, inspired me to write that story. I then spoke and interviewed people from the locals from the area, and they were telling me there are many legends, but people do not believe in that anymore. But we locals do. If you really want to hear them, I will tell you. I said I would love to. And I got the most interesting, marvelous, and magical material. Being a Jungian analyst myself, I have many times thought about how can more people have access to therapy. I believe that through these stories, there is a possibility to find yourself in one of the many characters that appear and have some insight as you follow the story. The way the book was developed was I wrote the stories, and when I had the stories, I thought it would be a very good idea to illustrate them. I invited Saul, who illustrated the book, and since his English is not very good, I read to him the stories in Spanish. I was translating the stories for him as he was painting the stories simultaneously while he heard them. It was a very interesting process because Saul was feeling my emotion as I read, but I was feeling how he got involved in the story and the insights that he was getting while I read. It was a very interesting process. So I believe this is a process that can happen with any reader. of the stories that I would like to refer to is Band-Aids. Band-Aids is a story written because I believe that we all have a wound, and at times we need Band-Aids, probably more than one. Human beings are not perfect. Our parents were not, our grandparents were not, and neither are we. So what are we going to do, and how are we going to live with the wound each of us has? And this is a story about how this very specific wound can be transformed into accepting one's own nature and knowing that we are in this world unique because of our that special wound that we can get to accept. Standing in one polarity gives us a very narrow view of life and a very poor understanding of the other, very, if at all, empathy towards differences, which I think in the world we live now is terribly important. So in the story of an ear and voice will interchange roles, and each will experience the opposite. The end of the story I'm going to read this story, and also to find out when have you been an ear, when have you been a voice, and what have you discovered in life when you have tried to interchange roles, if you have ever done that. Once upon a time there was an ear that became so important in the body kingdom that he became the subject and main character of this story. It all started one day when Ear got plucked. For many years, Ear had been faithfully fulfilling his duty in the body kingdom without occurring to him to do anything else. This story goes on, and then we arrive to this paragraph where Ear managed to mumble, "I want to be heard. Would you please help me, voice?" So this is the story that talks about polarities. Standing in one of the polarities in life gives us a very narrow view. And this movement of being able to discover that there is the other side and more possibilities. The end of the story I'm going to read this story, and also to find out when have you been an ear, when have you been a voice, and what have you discovered in life when you have tried to interchange roles, if you have ever done that. When I began writing stories with a Mexican twist, I didn't know I was writing a book. It was actually my way to express what I was hearing, living, observing in the world. Through writing the stories, I discovered myself that there are new ways of understanding the same matter. The stories taught me possibilities that I had not contemplated before. I wondered myself, where are these stories coming from? That is an answer I do not know, I do not have. But I have seen that also in my practice. Many times we're looking for answers for how to solve situations. And then some things happen that I call it the magic in life. And people can transform themselves, their lives, have a better quality. And that happened to me while I wrote stories with a Mexican twist.